Good evening and welcome to an artist talk for our Art DFAX faculty exhibit that's currently in the MSSU Spiva Gallery here on campus. It will run from April 1st through April 24th, and I'm going to introduce each of the faculty one by one. They're going to come up and give us a brief, very mini artist talk, about 10 minutes each, and they have slides to share with you and tell us a little bit about their work and their process. But I'm pleased to introduce each of my colleagues. I can tell you they're all very hardworking and very active within the, not only just the local art community, but nationally. And I think that they all create really great work. And I'm really excited about the show. It really came together. I think it looks great. And I'm also really interested and excited to hear what they have to say tonight. So if you will, please give a warm welcome to Professor and our Department Chair, Frank Pischker. I should say, if you don't know, he is the sort of the center of our ceramics and 3D and really pretty much everything. So here he is.
Damn it, I had no idea I was going first. This button? Pointing at the computer. Hey, there I am. Yes, I teach ceramics, and I've done a range of things within the world of ceramics, both sculptural and functional. Right now, in the exhibition, I've decided to focus on some functional forms, and actually kind of a return to my regular sort of type of work. The last several shows I've been in the gallery have all been based or part of one of our international trips. And usually for those shows, I am modifying what I tend to make as a reaction to that country and what I've seen on that trip. So this is the first time in a while I've had a show in the gallery where I actually got to show my regular sort of work. So if this thing works, this is from last summer. Yeah, that's about what my summer was like. Whoa, that's fun. So that's an artist booth. So one of the things that you do when you're an artist is you try to make some money off of your artwork to create a living for yourself. So this was an exhibition actually in my hometown last summer. And so a cousin of mine TikToked me up, which is cool because otherwise I would not be on TikTok at all. Oops, man, this thing just explodes. So this is a little bit more typical of the work that I do. I work primarily in stoneware, primarily firing in a reduction atmosphere, which means during the course of heating up the kiln, because we are using a non-renewable resource, natural gas, there's a combustion atmosphere, and so I can control how much air in relationship to how much fuel is in that kiln. And when you have a certain amount of heat and you have a certain amount of fuel and you already have a fire, that fire wants to continue, and the third component it needs is oxygen. If I am cutting off the air supply, the only way I can get that oxygen is to steal it from the glaze materials and the clay materials. When you do that, you get color shifts. So most of my work has primarily relied on me working the surface of my forms. So I'm carving them, I'm etching them, I am transforming them from a thrown surface into some other sort of textural surface, and then using very tiny amounts of iron in the glaze and starving the kiln of oxygen to make that iron shift into different colors. But there's only about 1 or 2 pieces in the show that actually feature this type of work. The other work, I don't even know where I'm pointing now, has been surfaced more decorated with liquid clays. And so I've experimented with changing things up a little bit, and so I've got a few of those pieces in the show as well. So instead of relying on iron so much in the glaze, I'm totally relying on iron in the clay and the clay surface to tint the glazes. So we got some of those in the show as well. So I do have an Instagram where I show all my disasters and none of my actual successes. So if you want to feel better about yourself in life, there it is. And I think that's my last slide. So now we roll the dice and see who gets to come up here next.
We have Professor Kyle McKinsey, who is not able to make it this evening. He did give me permission to just kind of give him a mini intro and show some of his slides. He's in sort of at the center of our paintings 2D area, and this is his artist statement, which I will read. The first paintings in the Wallow series depict the smashed, churned, and dried earth of a bison wallow at Prairie State Park near Meadowmines, Missouri. The surface is not unlike that of a painting on which ground earth is mixed with water or oil and smeared, dribbled, and pushed until it congeals into a record of its manipulations. I love the complexity of the surface and the incredible power and life that was recorded there in the dried mounds and mud puddles. The 2 paintings in the show try to convey the raw physicality of the prairie landscape and the bison that occupy it. So we have this image, Horizon 38, and this painting, well, I should say paintings, bison. And you can see both of them in the show. They're both in the show. Next, we have Professor Ed Outhouse, who is also unable to make it this evening. Ed is at the center of, along with, Ed is at one of our graphic design faculty members. And he says, my academic research has focused on design for social change and police brutality by creating posters for public exhibits to encourage dialogue among viewers. The intent is to show the disparity between the modern realities of police brutality against minorities and antiquated nostalgia of the mid-20th century American dream. This is an example of 2 of his images that have that theme at the center of it. He also designs all of the posters, or most of the posters anyway, for our gallery shows within the MSSU Spiva Gallery. So next we have Professor Amber Mintert, who's at the center of our fibers and painting areas and also art appreciation.
Hello. I see a lot of friendly faces. Hey. Yes, so my background originated in painting, specifically water media, and I teach water media here on campus, but I also have a background in mixed media and fiber arts. And so, as Frank was mentioning, there are 2 ways that I typically show my work, because he mentioned you have to make money as an artist also. So my painting is what I typically show in venues where I'm wanting to sell my work, because painting sells very well for people to put in their homes. And that's where my watercolor and mixed media come in play. And most of my paintings are mixed media. So this is not in the show, but this is just an example of some of the mixed media pieces I'm working on right now in a 2D format. But if I'm showing work to go into juried exhibitions, which I also do typically outside of the region, like I've shown work in Chicago and Virginia and some other places, I like to show more of my mixed media fibers work. So this show is not showing my painting, which is what you'll find in regional galleries around here that I sell locally. It's more of my work that I show actually outside of the region. So I wanted to share that this time, because I don't think people around here get to see my fibers work as much. So. Where do I point it? Oh, how about the arrow key? Ah, there. Okay, this is just another one of my paintings just to talk about a little bit. I've been an artist most of my life. My inspiration really is about myself as a woman, so my art is very much about being a woman, about my travel and my daily life. This is already talking a little bit about my watercolor and mixed media, and then fiber arts. This is another painting just to represent that side of my art, because some of you take painting with me, and so I wanted to just show some of that if you are one of my students, that is some of the work I do as well. But my work is really about being a woman. I don't think that being a woman, I could make something that wasn't about that personally. That's just, it resonates with me so much as my identity, and that I feel like I've done so much study about the lack of representation of women in history, that is something that I feel very passionate about. So even my paintings, stuff like this and the previous painting, all have something about them when I'm making them that I'm thinking about my identity as a female and the voice of a female, even if I'm the only one who understands that. This is my artist statement. I'm not going to go through that. That's something that Christine suggested to us. So this is the work that I've got right now. And before I can talk about this work, I have to take off my lipstick, because that's very much a part of this. So let me wipe this off, because this is what this piece is about. This piece is about women taking off the mask that they wear, and the way that we put on our face every day, and the way that we, as women, often feel like we have to show ourselves differently than who we really are. So I'm very much about the process when I'm making my fibers mixed media pieces. The process is extremely important, and I research everything that I do. I research it down to the very detail. That actually happens with my paintings as well. If there is any kind of realistic fauna or flora or bird or anything like that, or animal, I've researched it. I can tell you the Latin name for that. I can tell you the region it's from. I pay a lot of attention, and I research everything I do. That's part of that historical side, that research side of me. But this particular piece that's out there, that's the weaving, I presented about 2 months ago a question, and I put it on Facebook just as a random venue or place to do this. I put out this question, and I said, anybody who would like to answer, please answer this if you're female, and you can answer privately, you can message me privately, you can talk to me privately, you can answer online, but I want you to tell me, I feel most like myself when and I had over 75 respondents between the ages of 17 and 83, all women, and biologically women as well. So these were all women, and I took every single phrase that every woman told me, and I wrote them out, and then I rewrote them on fabric using a paste resist method where you dye the fabric. So I used a plain cotton fabric, and I put every single comment and every single word that the women told me. Then I took that fabric and I cut it into strips, and I wove it together. And one of the things I was looking for was what was a commonality. And one of the major commonalities is that no woman mentioned getting dressed for somebody else, or putting on makeup, or putting on that mask. Much of the responses were things about being in nature, being with family, being alone. There was dancing, there was taking photographs, there were, just a lot of different variations of things that didn't require anybody to have to be something for someone else. And so this is part of my process. This is me so my images are a lot about my process. And then, okay, yeah, and so then you can see the piece next door. I embedded a lipstick into the weaving, and I wove it, and I did not cut, or I did not dismiss any of the fabric. None of it is taken away. All of the fabric is in there, so no woman's words were eliminated. That's why one side of the weaving is longer than the other. And then I incorporated red fabric, or red embroidery yarn into it to represent that lipstick as well, and that women don't need that to feel like a human or to feel like they are themselves. They don't need those masks. So that's the first piece. The second piece I want to talk about a little bit is my other piece up there that is not just a pretty face. And this one, I like working in mixed media because you can work in a lot of different places. And I started this, I was putting this piece together, and I work with a lot of materials from different places. But this last month, my dad has been very sick. He almost died, and that's not like oh, he almost died. He really did almost die. And so I had to spend several weeks in Chicago sitting by his bedside, giving my stepmother a break, reading the monitors, letting the nurses know he needed help, things like this, because he was sedated. And so I include this picture of me sitting next to my father. That's his hand up there, you can kind of see. And I'm working on this art piece, and I'm telling about it. I'm talking to him. I'm like, Dad, I'm doing this while he's completely sedated. So I don't know if he heard anything, but I'm working on the piece and telling him what I'm doing. So I just wanted to include that because that's been part of the story of this process. But I'm very messy when I work because my ideas, they come out of my head, and I think about them for a long time, and then when it's time to make it, I don't let myself hinder or get away from that. I don't know if some of you, I've seen some of you in studio, once you start, you can't stop. And it's like, I'm gonna work until midnight, until the next day, and I'm gonna keep going. Once the process has begun, you're going to finish it. There's no turning back. And so this is kind of a piece of my space here showing you. And so that piece is about, I used a cigar box from Brick House Cigars, and if you understand the term brick house and how a woman is called a brick house and that terminology, and it can be derogatory, it can also be a compliment, depends on what side you're on of that comment, but as an object, and then the pretty face, and how women are seen sometimes in the workforce, sometimes in their home, sometimes in social events. But if you look past the pretty face, they're full of thoughts and ideas and things to say that are of importance. And so that's what that piece is about, and then you can see the rest of it. So my pieces are really just about the process and what I go through and what I think about. There are a lot of sketching is involved, and looking for the pieces to make that work. I do a lot of garage sailing and thrift storing and hunting and finding pieces. And sometimes they're pieces from my personal collection of items, like things from my own family that I found or that I have that I'm willing to give up for the pieces because they're more important than letting that heirloom sit in a drawer, that they need to be seen. So I think that's all my, oh, hold on. Yes. All right.
Thank you, Dr. Mintert. So we have next Professor Almira Bagheerazadeh, whose primary area of research and teaching here is in digital design and new media.
Hello, everyone. It's a little bit stressful to be up here, to be honest, but I know almost everyone, so that feels great. So I'm Almira Bagheerazadeh. I think I have the hardest last name in art department, but I don't make people to say it, so that's fine. But I'm going to talk a little bit about my work and my inspiration, and yeah, this kind of stuff. This is my artist statement, but I'm going to pass through it because during my work, I'm going to talk more about this, what basically my work is about. So most of my work are about mental health or meditation on mindfulness practices. I started to work with ultraviolet light and invisible ink. And I think for me, those kind of represent the subconscious and relations that you can make in terms of things that you cannot see. It can be something spiritual or it can be something related to mental health. I have some artists that inspire me. There are actually many people who are really inspiring in these terms. But I included two of them because I think they have different parts of the spectrum kind of there. So the first one is Anne Charlotte Robertson. She kind of makes films that act as diaries for her. And she talks about her experiences and basically capture her daily experiences of her life. But they're really interesting work, and most of them are about mental health. The other person that is really interesting for me is Jordan Belson. He makes videos to capture meditative experiences. So most of his work are really calm. They use a lot of light. And I kind of feel a lot in common with him when I'm working on subjects that are related to those kind of practices. And something else that I get inspired by are some of Iranian miniature painting. So we have this book in Iran called A Story of Kings, and it has a lot of epic poems. So I've been getting some inspiration from that book for a while in my illustrations. And with some of my work that I make, I use some of the patterns and I get some ideas from those kind of like Iranian miniature painting. And my first work that I started to work with the technique was a flip book. So I'm just going to play this video for you to see. So this work was actually made based on Jung archetypes. And I had a flip book that you see it in regular light, and then you see it under black light. And under the black light, when you're going through the pages, you would be able to see the animation. So this is another work. So the process that I work with is that usually I start with a short video, with a short 2D hand-drawn animation that I make it digital. And through that process, I get some ideas to make the installation piece. So this was more related to those kind of meditative practices. And then I have some other works that I started to use plexiglass instead of cells that animators use in, let's say, classic Disney animation. So I draw the frames with invisible ink on plexiglass, and then when you basically have black light flashing on them, they start to look like an animation. I don't know how I can make this to play. Is it okay? So this was one of the works that I thought it turned out pretty successful with the technique because it was able to show the animation. But then with this technique, you cannot kind of show everything because the number of the frames that you can use is pretty limited. And I had this experience when, with meditation, that it's been a while that I wanted to show, but at the same time, I feel like I cannot have as many frames as I want. So I just decided to kind of go with only 2 frames, have a mirror to get more from those frames, making kind of 4 with having the mirror there. And I just wanted to show that experience, like with invisible ink and light going over acrylic. I engraved the acrylic with the laser cutters. And I burnt a lot of acrylic pieces and throw a lot of acrylic away. But this is like what I end up getting in the end. And so the experience that I had, for me, it looked like looking at a Persian carpet. And then I show it to my Iranian friends, and they are like, this looks so religious. This look like the religious shrines that we go to in Iran. And I was kind of like, oh my God, I don't want that. And then I started kind of freaking out and thinking about how I can take that away. But what happens is that in Iran, we have these kind of shrines that usually you have some layers, and people stand behind a kind of like a guard line, and there is a Islamic leader figure that is usually buried there, and people go around and pray in those places. So I was kind of like, if this is my box and if this is like a shrine, what I would want to have at the end of it. And for many of us, those places, although they can be spiritual, but at the same time, they are places for oppression, especially for women. So I think that's where the image of a girl is coming from, because she's not covering herself the way she's supposed to do in those spaces. So yeah, this is my work. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Instructor Scott Murray, whose area of research and his artistic production is mostly in 3D and sculpture. I'm going to press that button
Okay.
to advance.
Well, hello, my name is Scott Murray. I did not have the artist statement submitted for the presentation, but a lot of things I work with are based on material. Growing up in a blue-collar family, a lot of the materials are very important, obviously. In this show, everything that you will see is all new pieces. I try to pride myself on process, but a lot of times, a lot of the materials I use are found materials. And so my fun comes from altering those as much as possible and trying to make those found objects transcend into other things. Another type of work I like to play around with is screen printing. This piece is really new, but this is playing with a few of the different ideas of some of the different subject matters. This piece is titled Carrot Grenade. It is a fairly one-color piece, fairly decent in size, I would say. The next piece you see here is titled Two Places at Once. Dealing with a sick spouse, you struggle with trying to be at both places at once, obviously, is where the title comes from. There's a lot of juggling going on within the piece. There's a few little hints of things that hopefully the viewer will notice that are similar to other pieces in the gallery as well. The next piece here is titled Contrasting Views. These are 3-piece carrots. They're wood-turned pieces of oak. The leather is cut out using the laser cutter that we have here. And playing around with the kind of trying to find humor within some of the things I deal with on a daily basis. So that's where the kind of cartoon effect comes from. I'm surprised this fit on the screen. This is a very large piece. It can be arranged in several different ways. The title, 52 Weeks, kind of speaks to a yearly base. These are laser cut pieces of leather along with various sizes of turned oak on the wood lathe. They can be arranged in almost any fashion. The idea is that people would be interested in owning one of these and having them in their space. I've always dealt with the idea of chasing a carrot, the idea of reward versus the consequence to most situations. For the longest time, I dealt with, and I think most students and sometimes other colleagues, you get in this static feel of maybe doing the same sort of thing or dealing with the same subject matter. So that's where this piece got its title. It's not much more than that, other than hopefully becoming an interesting piece to look at, but titled Static Carrot. And then, the idea of throwing carrots at the wall, still going back to that humor side of things, that's where it got its title, Splat. I guess that's it. Well, that was quick. Thank you.
So next we have instructor Jason Stamper, whose area of research and art making is 2D and printmaking and more.
Hello, how's everybody doing? So, I've been teaching here for 13 years, but in addition to my responsibilities here at Southern, I teach at Northwest Arkansas Community College, and I've been teaching there for the past 10 years. For the past 5 years of that tenure, I have founded and overseen the oil painting program. And so for the past 5 or 6 years, I've been doing a lot of painting. And so this series of work that I did last year in the print studio is kind of a return to printmaking for me, and it's really influenced by the work that I've been doing in my painting work. The past few years have been a very transitional period in my life. I was divorced 2.5 years ago, and so I find myself in a place of sublime happiness for the first time in a long time, just to be honest with you. And the repercussions both of my sons are now in college, and so I find myself with a lot less parenting and responsibility than I am used to having. And so that has really reflected in my painting in terms of simplifying my subjects and being really a reflection of this new chapter that I've entered in my life. And so that carried over to this series, this new body of work in these monotypes that you see in the gallery. So when I enter the studio, I don't have any preconceived notion of exactly what I'm going to do. The first thing I do is think about a range or a field, so to speak, of color that I want to deal with while I'm in the studio for that period. And I lay my colors out, and I start mixing and start modifying the ink to make it appropriate for the type of print that I'm going to do. And then I start working out a color field. And this is kind of an example of one session in the studio. And starting from this end, and I just use the entire studio, and I pull a print, and I go from inception to pulling it off of the press in about 3-4 hours usually. And I did a series of about 20 of these last semester actually. And I'm really concerned with breaking down the presentation of my work. A lot of my printmaking, especially my printmaking, has been very design heavy and detail oriented and process heavy and very arduous, like laborious work. And I wanted to simplify that as a reflection of how I feel about my life being a little bit less complicated and just calmer and simpler, and it's a very nice place to be. And so this is Elysian Field number 2, I believe. And so this was all pulled off of one plate, okay? And a single pull from a single plate. And so we can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 colors, all split fountain. Those of you that don't know, aren't familiar with printmaking process, split fountain is the gradient from one color to another. And there's just something about the calmness and the simplicity of these prints that I really am responding to and am enjoying doing, as opposed to spending 120 hours on a wood block. It's a very different way of engaging with print than I'm used to. This is straight on till morning. Those of you, are you familiar with that phrase? Anyone familiar with that phrase? So second star to the right, Peter Pan. And it's also the title of my favorite band, one of their albums, Blues Traveler, Straight On Till Morning. So that's a nice one. Very simple, just Crimson Field. Fire Island, this one kind of reminded me of the fires in Maui, like for some reason. Like I kind of responded to that. This is 3 plates. That is 2 plates. And that is 2 plates. So two passes, and that is a single plate. So I don't sell my work. All the paintings that I've ever done, all of the involved drawings that I've ever done are still hanging up in my house. And I don't do work for other people. I do work for me, and I do work as a direct reflection of what I'm going through at the time I'm going through it. And to give up that beautiful piece of work that I spent so much time on so that I can have a little bit of money, and that to just disappear and have no idea what I spent that money on isn't worth me remembering that time in my life when I created that piece. Okay? So to get by in life, I teach. But when I make work, it's for me. It's for people to appreciate. It's for people to get a taste of who I am and what I care about. Okay? So it is important for us to make a living. It's important for us to have choices in our life. But when I pass away, none of that matters. What's going to matter is that my sons are going to have my work up in their house. And they're going to remember that time in our lives when I was making that work. So that's a little bit of a different take. I'm kind of a purist when it comes to that kind of stuff. So that's all I have for today. I hope you enjoy those prints. Thanks a lot.
Next, we have instructor Brenda Sagan. 2D and painting is the area of specialization and her focus within her work in general. Did you want to press?
Yep. Okay. So I'm the only one that brought notes. Writing is a form of thinking for me. And so I often have scraps of paper with stuff written on it. And I have been writing and writing and writing in preparation for this, like, 8 minutes of talking. But I guess that's sort of like what I do in a painting. It can take me weeks, sometimes months, to get through a work. And I appreciate Jason's desire to hang on to everything he does, because you're really turning loose of a piece of your life and your existence when you put it out in the world and sell it. And coming to the show, I was working on 2 different pieces, but they were not going to be ready. I had to borrow 4 pieces to put in the show because I didn't have enough work at home because it had sold. So that was a good thing, but it was a little frustrating to be in that position. I have a long association with Southern. I came to school here to earn my second bachelor's degree. I graduated 20 years ago from here. And along with Scott and Kyle, we were in the same class. We all graduated at the same time, and we're all back teaching here. I thought I had given it up a couple of years ago. I had daughters having babies that were going to take me away for too much of the semester, and then my husband had knee surgery, and so I thought, okay, I guess I have to hang this up. And Frank kind of got on his knees and begged me to come back because he needed somebody to fill the slot. And so it has been fun to be back and teaching drawing again, which I taught drawing here. I taught at Pitt State, where I did my master's degree work, and also at Labette Community College for a few semesters. I spent a lot of time teaching watercolor and color theory. I have really enjoyed learning about why color is so meaningful to me. And I've only put 2 works up on the slides, and they're both watercolors. The first one is from some photographs I took in the Masonic Cathedral a few years ago. I helped in the restoration of one of their large rooms where I had to go back and replicate painted over stencil work that had been done when they built the building in the 20s. It took me as long as it took to have a baby, about 9 months. And it was spent on scaffolding 12 feet off the floor and moving that around and standing up. And I sort of pushed the arthritis that was already starting and have been suffering from that ever since. But like most artists, there's something there that I hope will remain for a long, long time. They hadn't done anything to it for years. And so I hope my painting lasts for 100 years in that spot. On the stairwell, though, one day I was taking pictures and there was nobody else in the building, and the light was coming through this stained glass window, which I have one of the stained glass window, and it was beautiful. But what really struck me was not just the colors in the glass, but that they cast a shadow. And you don't think about light casting a shadow, but it does. And especially when the glass has color added to it. It's not opaque, it's transparent glass, but that color in and of itself created a shadow. And I also, in my early training back years ago, I did not really learn how to do much of anything in the drawing and painting classes. I had very misogynistic professors who were also very modernist and did not teach you how to do a particular thing. It was like, you figure it out. Just give me a work when you're done. And so part of my teaching has been in response to that, really, really wanting to know how to do something, and nobody would show me, and nobody would point me in a direction, and I was begging for it, to the point where one of those professors literally patted me on the head and said, "You're a cute little girl, you're gonna go off and get married and have a family, and I'm not gonna waste my time on you." So, I maybe very angry. I would have handled that a whole lot more differently today than I did then. But when I teach, I am in there with those students, and I want to show them everything that I have learned over the last many years of both learning art, learning those techniques, sometimes taking what I saw my teachers do and then changing it up so it worked for me. And perspective, linear perspective, and trying to get that correct was a real struggle for me. So I'm really drawn to architecture, especially the old architecture. The more beat up, the better, although in this case, the marble floors and walls gave these beautiful reflections. And it's an exercise in frustration, but also it teaches me so that I can keep teaching my students. The light has always been really important to me, and what it does in an old building is it might be abandoned, crumbling, stinky, dirty, but you light it up and it comes alive, and you begin to feel some resonance of what that building once was and the people that once were there and used it. I'm not going to read through that statement, but hopefully you'll get a chance to. The other work, this is probably pretty resonant with most of the work that I do. This is actually from several photographs, and actually I was plein air studying painting with one of my students and sketching. This is on my little 4.5 acre property out east of Carthage. And I came out, I have chickens and geese, and so I spent a lot of time outside, and I was getting them fed, and I looked over, and this was right at the equinox. It was either the day of or the day after, and the light coming down through these gnarly, twisty mulberry trees and the vines that were hanging and the overgrowth of our property there, it just lit it up, and it looked like this cathedral to me. But even the shape of the arches came and reminded me of the cathedral buildings in Europe and the windows. And so much of what light does is give this, to me anyway, kind of a sacredness to a space. And it can be very momentary. Within 5 minutes, the light looked different. And I kept taking pictures as the sun got lower and lower just to see what I was going to get. And so this is one of the works I've done out of that. Both of these paintings I was really happy to get into a National Watercolor Society show in Wichita a couple of years ago, and they both sold on opening night. So they couldn't be here in person, but I thought you might enjoy seeing them. There's a lot of drawing in a work like this. Process-wise for watercolor, I usually do some kind of a sketch. This one I actually drew directly on the paper and got my basic shapes down. And then there are layers and layers and layers of glazes, starting real soft glazes, and then each of those sparkles of color are a leaf shape. I didn't want to paint every leaf, but I wanted it to feel like every leaf was there. And it took lots of layers, lots of waiting for it to dry, but it finally felt like I was walking in under the trees and the light was coming through. So just like that experience we watched the eclipse of the light, and then it became dark, and then it was light again. That was something really special to me. The other thing I've spent a lot of time on are animals and birds, and most especially because I sense their intelligence and their presence. And I want others to recognize them not as just this thing that's around, but that's something that has a life and thinks and feels just as we do. I think that's all.
So thank you to everyone. As you can see, we have some very talented faculty here at MSSU that you should feel fortunate to have, teaching your classes, in my opinion. I do want to say Carmen is not here either, but she focuses primarily on art appreciation and painting. So there is one painting of hers in the show. So are there any questions you'd like to ask any of the faculty about their process or their work, or? Everyone's maybe a little shy, but you shouldn't be shy, because I think most of us know each other in here. Okay, so we do have a reception, and it has been catered by Bookhouse Cinema, so the food is pretty good, and I would like to invite you to come over to the gallery to enjoy the food and ask questions while we're over there. So thank everyone again. And we'll see you over there. So I believe it's already ready, right? Tijon is ready? Okay, good, perfect. Yeah.